Good afternoon, everyone. I have a bold prediction that scaling education is the world's largest problem that we're going to face. And the only way we're going to do it is through technology. And I want to walk us through why that is. But first, let's look at why is this the largest scaling challenge that we're facing. I'm an economist in training, so I look at it from a classic supply-demand point of view. As you can see here, by 2030, we're facing a large increase in the demand of education. By 2030, an additional 850 million students will be requiring education. UNESCO estimates that to meet this demand, we need to educate an additional 67 million teachers. Now that's quite punchy, but it sort of fades when you look at this quote. Every lesson is a battle, why teachers are lining up to leave. This was a study that The Guardian did last year, where they estimated that 80% of UK secondary teachers want to leave their profession the coming 12 months. So what we're facing is mass exodus, potentially, of the most important resource in education, the teacher. And it is, in my opinion, that the way we can really scale education and quality education in an equitable way in this scenario is through education and technology combined. So what I want to do, I want to take you back to something a lot more down to earth than what we've seen the last couple of hours. We've been in space, we've been in machine learning. I want to bring you back to something that you probably haven't been in for a couple of years, maybe decades for some of us. And I want to bring us back. What are the challenges that we're actually seeing in the classroom? Through my time at Cognity, I've visited 300-400 schools around the world. And these are the 4 challenges that really pop up quite frequently, and that I think technology can be used to solve. So the first one is student engagement. Now, when you enter the classroom, you hope that this is the most inspiring place your child can be in. You hope that it is a place where they can learn based on their own ability, where they can learn interpersonal skills, and where they can really blossom in terms of creativity. However, there's a reason why the #1 watched TED Talk is Sir Ken Robinson on why schools kill creativity. It's been watched 62 million times. And in it, he says basically that we do not grow into creativity, which is what a lot of us think we do. Rather, we're educated out of creativity. And what does he mean by this? He thinks that because the education system is so linear, it's so conformational, it means that you're not able to explore your creativity because there's so much focus on having a standardized process of learning. And if you think about the role of the school, if you look back 50, 60 years, the role of the school was really that where core learning took place. It didn't have monopoly, but it was much more centralized when it came to where learning took place in society. And that's changing today. Learning happens continuously in so many different areas. For example, 50% of all YouTubers say that they go on YouTube to learn something. 20% of all videos watched every single day on YouTube have something to do with learning. Now that's everything from how Kim Kardashian applies bronzer, which might not be as relevant, to things like how does a combustible engine work? My nephew, Jonathan, he has learned more English playing Fortnite than he has in English class. So we're learning in so many different ways, and that means that the classroom is not the most engaging forum anymore. And that's where really we need to bring technology in to make it that again, in 2 ways. First, by incorporating technological advancements and applications such as Kahoot, who's speaking later, where you can engage students with quizzes, for example. But the second thing is also to free up time for the classroom once again to become that creative core, something we'll touch upon later. Secondly, knowledge retention. Our education system is not really built to be able to apply the core learnings of what a good learning is. So if you look at the curricula systems around the world, GCSE, IGCSE, A-levels, IB, AP, they're all basically the same. You have a huge amount of content that students need to learn, and then they're tested on that at the end of 1 or 2 years to get their grade. Now, this would suggest that the best way to learn is to cram, but surprise, this is not a very effective learning method. Instead, research shows us that the best way to learn is something called spaced learning, whereby you take the same amount of study time, but you leave intervals in between the periods of learning. So I study something, I leave it. I study something, I leave it. I study something, I leave it. I recall it, and therefore I'm forced to remember it much more. But the cramming technique doesn't really work, and that's what schools most often end up in because they have so much content they need to get through in a rapid pace. Now, the second thing is also, how are classrooms structured? What are the activities you do? The traditional classroom is much like I'm doing right now. The teacher stands up and lectures on a theory or a core skill. They give homework to the students who then have to go back home and apply this theory, often in a more challenging context. And this is where you lose a lot of students. A, because they're not engaged, or B, because it's too challenging and they get stuck and they don't know how to advance. They don't know how to proceed. But what if we can actually flip the classroom model so that the students learn the basic theory at home, and then when they get to class, the teacher and the classroom is used to apply this information, this theory, this knowledge. Because retention rates of information drastically increase when you apply the information, from around 10% when you read something, to 70 to 80% when you do active learning, when you apply it, when you collaborate around it. So that's how we can design the classroom of the future, the collaboration around knowledge and theory. The third aspect is that of differentiated teaching. And this is the holy grail of teaching right here, but it is one that is extremely difficult to implement in reality, because it is an extraordinarily difficult skill for a teacher to be able to teach based on each student's individual needs. There are two really scary statistics in education that I faced that I wanted to, I'm not gonna have you guess what it is. I do this with teachers and they actually don't get it right either. So the 50% is what is taught in the classroom that students already know. So imagine that, a classroom is sitting there and the teacher, the most valuable resource, is being underutilized because they're teaching something that students already know. But the issue is here that not every student has the same 50%. Every single student has a different 50%. So this exemplifies why differentiated teaching is so difficult to do for the teacher. Now, the second statistic, 60 to 80%, this is how much percentage of time that teachers don't know what's happening in their classroom. This is a bit more contested by teachers. They say, no, I know what I'm doing, what my students are doing. But just imagine a scenario, they've given an assignment and the student is doing it, and they're helping one particular student. What is the rest of the class doing? That is not that easy to know. And this is really where technology can come in and help with mass differentiation. Because what technology allows you to do is to help you identify what each student needs, what each 50% the student has, and therefore help the student and the teacher really take control of their own learning journey and teach themselves based on what they need. Lastly, teacher workload. We're back to where we started. If 80% of UK secondary teachers are considering leaving the profession within 12 months, the number one reason cited was workload. An OECD study that came out recently showed that of the entire workload that the teacher has, only 50% of their time is spent teaching. The rest of the time goes to marking, admin, and things like that. And that's really where technology can come in again and boost the impact and the ability for the teacher to spend time in the classroom doing what he or she entered the classroom to do, which is to teach, not to mark. So I've been talking about what technology can help in classrooms. Why are we not seeing this more regularly? The education industry is estimated to be worth around $5 trillion, which is 8 times that of the software industry, yet it is only 2% digitized. And the pace of digitization in education is expected to be 5 times slower than that of other sectors. So why is it that education is the vertical of society where you're seeing so much slower digitalization? Well, as an edtech entrepreneur, I think it comes down to a bit, the holy grail of startups does not really apply to education. So if you think of the holy grail as scalability and disruptability, think of Uber. You have one product that's scalable across the entire world without that much regulation. Education does not work like that. It can't be scalable because each education system has their own requirements. So you can't create a one product fits all, one product fits none in that case. And with the disruptability, this is an entire ecosystem. And you cannot go in and disrupt one part of it. You have to look at the entire chain and see what it is, works and doesn't work, and where you can continuously tweak rather than revolutionize. So you need to localize the solution and work within the ecosystem. And this is what we at Kognity have tried to do. Just briefly on what we do, we are a startup founded in Sweden in 2015. We're now in over 100 countries, so we have been able to scale quickly. But what we've done is that we've made the textbook, something that's been at the core of classroom teaching, intelligent and interactive. So it has engaging content for the students that we touched upon. It has automatically corrected assignments that are able to help the teachers do formative assessments continuously. And it also has a data capability where it helps the students and teachers identify their own 50% and what it is that they need to know. Our vision really is to take this on a global basis. So we want to radically improve the learning for the world's 1.5 billion students. This is a real challenge in developing nations. As I said, most of the demand is coming from Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa. This is a classroom in Ghana I visited last year, where they have roughly €3 per student and year to spend on educational resources. How do you scale EdTech in that scenario? That's what we're trying to figure out. And we are having a real impact when it comes to engagement. 89% of our students say that we are improving their learning based on this approach. This was actually a picture that was sent to me last week by a school in Peru, where the school said we're not going to use Kognity anymore, and they staged a protest. They sent us a picture. Every single student has signed a letter saying, please, can you give us access to Kognity somehow? That is engagement, and that's what happens when you bring technology into the classroom in an effective way. But I want to have you guys do an exercise. If I were to imagine you to close your eyes and think about the last classroom you saw, the one you were last in, how many of you would have said something like this? Most of you. The funny thing is, I could have equally shown you this picture. This is 1893, one of the first pictures we have of a classroom. It's a bit more grainy, but it looks very similar. And I think this is the core issue of what education is facing, that it hasn't really evolved since the public education system was created in the 19th century. It was created then to really help prepare society for jobs. And that's where we set the equation that intelligence equals academic ability equals ability to get jobs. And that's where we still are. And there's so many interdependencies on these. You can even call it a supply chain of education, and which is what Harvard actually has done. And so what you see here is that because it is a supply chain, it's very difficult to change or disrupt. But I think one of the most important things that technology can do is actually to disrupt this. Because as we've heard, we're not going to be working anymore with the hard skills. It's the soft skills that need to come into place. It's things like your interpersonal skills, your ability to do critical thinking, group work, collaboration. All these 21st century skills are what the school should be focusing on, not the traditional aspects that they have been before. So one theory, one idea that's out there using technology is that what if we remove the monopoly of accreditation of a knowledge that a university currently has? What if we use blockchain instead of, say, a university to say that I know accounting or I know how to draw this building? If you apply blockchain into the accreditation of a skill or a knowledge, you remove some of that power, and all of a sudden the supply chain doesn't need to take place anymore, because the college or employer, they can actually find applicants and they can find people in a different way. And then you don't need to have as high a focus on getting high grades in high school. And that trickles down into the entire system changing. So when I get asked from teachers, when we talk about technology, the most frequently asked question I have is, are you trying to replace me? And I say, no, I'm trying to make you irreplaceable. But to do that, I need to help you shift from what a large part of your job has become, things that actually can be automated, and help you once again go back to really becoming the core mentor, the guide for the student, so that they're able to reach their full potential with also incorporating these soft sensory skills. So my bold prediction is that instead of technology removing the human element in education, I actually think that technology is what will repersonalize education again. Thank you very much.